Welcome to Kelly's Quest, the Transnational Journey, 50 states and 50 stories. Rhode Island's history fascinates me. Original home of the Nipmuc, Pequot, Wampanoag, and Narragansett people, Rhode Island founder Roger Williams made his way to the area after being exiled from the Massachusetts Bay Colony because of his advocacy for religious tolerance and separation of church and state. Rhode Island is the smallest state in the nation at 48 miles long and 37 miles wide. Despite its small area, Rhode Island, known as the Ocean State, boasts over 400 miles of coastline. It is also the home of today's guest, Stephen Lovejoy.
So good to see you.
Stephen is the first openly trans middle and high school athletic coach in the nation. He is also a passionate advocate for trans youth in Rhode Island.
Welcome to Rhode Island.
Stephen and I went to the South Kingstown Disc Golf Course in Wakefield to discuss the different strategies Stephen and the organizations he works with are taking to foster equity and inclusion in Rhode Island's public school systems. Plus, we threw a couple of discs here and there. Oh no, look at those.
This is pretty challenging.
We met a while back because you were doing a presentation about coaching and sports for trans youth. And are you still doing stuff like that?
So I am working and consulting with schools across the state if they get, kind of wind of my story. So trainings for teachers and for administrators, coaches. We're still finding our way kind of like with the coaching and athletic director, which is all like new and exciting territory. I find that the public is becoming more aware of the issues on a deeper level as opposed to just in the media or, so digging a lot deeper and starting to do the work themselves.
Yeah.
It's super exciting and also super challenging because there are some minds that you just have to talk it out with them a little bit more in understanding, the fear mongering that will go on in terms of political campaigns or getting ordinances passed that really target trans folk.
And in Rhode Island, you all are really progressive on protections for transgender people.
Yeah, and I think that's another reason for me and where I am is that back in 2001 is when the legislation was passed for anti-discrimination in public housing, education, credit. We were the second state actually other than Minnesota, and that has made a huge impact where now with the Department of Education, has a policy where each school now needs to do their homework and come up with their own policies. Most schools have done the work. There are a couple schools that haven't really done the work, and you'll find that in the more conservative sections of the state where people are unwilling to look at their own biases yet as a community. So we're getting there. But still a lot of work that needs to be done, a lot of education. Yep. Amazingly, like 2 weeks ago, I got a call from a school in Providence where the issues weren't necessarily surrounding trans kids or individuals, but about casual homophobia. And so this was my first time going into an elementary school and getting an hour-long assembly to talk with the kids.
That's huge.
Right. The adventure was more about questions. I'm like, hey, my name is Stephen, and I really love sports. I think it's a really great thing, and I love to play. And then, I posed to the group, I'm just like, so what questions do you have for me now that I've shared a little bit about myself? And they were like, what's your favorite sports basketball team? And what's your favorite sport? And it was through that relating then that I then came out and shared a little bit more. And so a couple of eyes were like trying to figure me out now again, or a couple mouths opened a little bit. As time went on, I got the opportunity to then say, hey, your teachers have brought me in here today to talk about something that they've noticed. And it's really about talking about or using that phrase, that's so gay. So then it was, so when you say that, it's called casual homophobia. It's kind of used in a funny light, but a joke, but it's not really a joke, and you're sending a signal to somebody who might be gay growing up. So then other questions, started to form. I tried to make it so that it wasn't shaming the people, the kids that have already used that.
Right, because that won't bring them around.
Right. So it was trying to bridge the gap between those two dynamics in smaller settings. And then from there, the kids started asking questions about, well, what's going on in the military? Like, these are second, third, and fourth graders that one wouldn't think normally that they would know, but kids do know, and they are aware. And it's our responsibility to really give them the most up-to-date information that we know of the world, and it's evidence-based learning, and it's based in science, and it's based in empathy, and not being dismissive of another person's experience. So it gives me hope for the future, and I hope that there are more instances that come about, because we do know that we need more of this in education.
We need role models too.
Yeah.
And so you just going there to be a role model for those kids was huge.
Now what really needs to be addressed are the schools that have come up with very poor policies that don't quite meet the good educational best practice. Where we desperately need good, sound health education, particularly when it comes to sex education, I think that the curriculum right now in schools, it's always been a touchy subject,
Yes.
always with being uncomfortable to some degree to talk about, one's identity or how, sexuality comes into play. I think that's where we're lacking. I think that educators need to be exposed to and be aware of that when we're talking about sexual identity, gender identity, that we're talking about body parts. So girls can have penises, boys can have vaginas, and that we focus in on how to take care of one's body parts and bodies and mind as well in all of that.
It also has to be put out there in a way that is palatable.
Yes.
Like you were saying earlier, you can't go shame a kid
Yep.
because you've lost instantly.
At the end of the day, teachers, we all struggle because there's curriculum that you have to deliver based on what the state says or what your school says. You're managing behaviors of students and other staff, and you're trying to problem solve in
And you got
quick
parents
moments.
coming in.
And then you have parents on the flip side. You have really great parents who are willing and have that workability. Then you also have parents who you can tell are still in fear-based. So how does one approach and have the soft skills in which to navigate that stuff? So when I see teachers, it's usually at the end of the day, and they're tired and they're exhausted already. And usually it's in a more, you have to do this for your professional development. When I am finally able to have that relationship in those spaces and times and moments, and to see them engage afterwards, they're thanking me at the end.
Were you a classroom teacher?
I was a classroom teacher in New York City. So to have that experience, and then to also have the experience of coaching high school athletes and middle school athletes, all within the context, unfortunately, of segregated sports. That's like a big thing of how do we problem solve to not separate kids at a very early age.
Yep.
When they don't need to be separated. So to speak out against that and to say that it's not best practice and that you're leaving a certain population behind and it's not as inclusive. 3/4 of the kids that start out playing competitively by the time they get to high school don't want to play high school because we have issues that we don't talk about, like toxic masculinity. So a lot of coaches go in and they have to break kids down in order to build them up, as opposed to, let's find out what your strengths are, let's find out what your weaknesses are. Do you still want to play? Do the kids have the motivation, and really be able to tap into that? And so I think we lack that in a lot of coaching experiences. Not all, but there's a lot of that.
So when you became a coach, did you know of any other transgender coaches
No.
in public education
Nope.
whatsoever?
Nope, I didn't know any teachers who were out publicly. Who inspired me to come out and tell my story was actually Kai Allums.
Yes.
So when Kai came out with his story, that's when I was like, okay, more folks are coming out and the topic's being discussed. And it could be that time, although you're certainly scared and you're worried about backlash. But then it really came down to an unfair inequality within my own school. You know, I was actually the winningest athlete to go through the doors of my high school on a high school level, but because I was socialized female and seen as that, I don't think that the committee members, particularly mostly the men, unfortunately there's the demographic, the straight, white, cisgender men, there's this hidden underneath element of feeling threatened, even when they might not even like acknowledge it or say that it's not. There's this denial piece, you know, of what makes a man and a woman, or a good person a good person in those ways. And so I had a friend, Sid Ziegler, who was a columnist for Outsports, and we had met in New York City. You know, he got wind of the story, and he's like, you know, I can help. Do you want me to help tell your story?
Oh,
and
wow.
and so he came in and he did an excellent job. I was certainly nervous that it still was going to be released, and I didn't have the support of my athletic director at the time. So yeah, I did it, and I got more support than I did negative. But I'm also, you know, that there are going to be YouTube comments out there.
And your students know, they see this, they see you doing good things, and they're like, I can do good things.
Yeah, it all comes down. That's like the first part of education, really, is a teacher or staff member or adult modeling good behavior.
Yep.
You know, is really coming from a place of, I want to support you, I want to respect you. If I have a disagreement with you, I want to do it in a kind way in which we create better understanding.
Yep.
Instead of a shutdown dismissal, I'm not willing to walk with you.
And I'm sure you've met some of the trans athletes in Rhode Island doing this.
I have, and you know, in sending that signal out, you're also getting calls from parents who are struggling, but it makes it all worth it in the end, because then you have those connections with those people later on. One of the most profound things has been a kid within my own school system who wants to transition, and the parents are struggling, and it happens to be by somebody that I used to play high school sports with. So they reach out. So there's this, you know, life kind of comes full circle in a lot of ways. And now this individual is like amazing. They're at, you know, going to university, they're doing theater, they're singing in Glee Club, you know, and they attended my wedding not too long ago as well.
Congratulations,
Thank
by
you.
the way, on the
Thank
wedding.
you.
That's a
Thank
big
you.
deal.
Yeah,
Well done.
she's my partner is just really fantastic, and we had to go through a lot to be with each other, and
I kind of want to talk about that in a little bit.
okay.
But I want to throw a disc because I'm getting a little chilled.
Okay, sound good. That sounds good. Let's
a
do
good-
it. So you want to give me a quick lesson or
Sure. So are you
remainder
going to
here?
throw it this way?
I'll do it this way,
Okay.
just so I don't like lose anything.
Even if you do.
All right, you go first,
Okay.
because you're a lefty. I forget you're a lefty. Southpaw. Nice job.
There you go. Now do you want to try one the other direction? Oh, it's going to be close to the water. Nope.
Ah! We'll go explore that. Oh, lovely. Nice shot.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
So you recently got married.
So we met actually a long time ago. I was a social work intern at this Youth Pride agency in Providence, and she was a volunteer at the time. She was.
Look at this. So you were doing good in the world.
Yeah.
And you met.
Yeah, and we
Perfect.
were, and you know, so we got to know each other as friends, and I've always thought highly of her in terms of like she was just kind and considerate. But I was in the middle of transitioning myself, and so we had gone out a couple of times and just thought the world of her, but I still wasn't ready with that transitioning in terms of relating to myself. So then we just kind of like lost touch for a while. I went to New York City. Like once I felt complete that I could, you know, my family would be okay, most of, you know, from the transition, I could just go down to New York City and be with some thought leaders and some artists. And then, you know, my sister had kids, and I do want to talk more because I love, you know, my niece and nephew. I just think they're the greatest to watch them grow up now playing sports. as well. I never thought I would be an uncle. And so we lost touch for a very long time, and at the Trans Philly Health Conference back in 2015, she had become a nurse. I bumped into her on the last day where we were doing some promoting for a documentary. We bumped into each other on the last day.
Doing good again.
I like to think that. And so from there, we exchanged numbers and we became friends. And then we, quickly fell in love afterwards. And we've been together for a good 3 years now. And we were like at the, last year sometime, we
played disc golf together.
We played disc golf together. You remember? She sends her regards, by the way.
Dang. Don't fall in.
Look it. Nope. It's.
You say
it's
that.
good. It's good. No.
You stop and then you fall
It's good.
in.
I got that.
Okay.
All right. So we're taking a shot here. That wasn't good. Oh, lovely. She beat me.
So your niece and nephew are athletes.
So my nephew is 11 now, and he plays hockey. He's like a defenseman for hockey. And my niece, she plays soccer for a Liverpool organization in Connecticut. And, both of them are really great at what they do. And so it's really just awesome when I have the opportunity to watch them play. There's nothing better. It's just really great kind of watching them grow up.
So,
yeah.
And they know that you're trans?
Yeah, actually, they've seen some of the articles.
Okay.
And it's up to parents, in the larger scope of society now, knowing now that they have these issues, that it's okay. Parents, go get educated on this topic and then have those conversations with kids. Don't deny a conversation or don't talk about this stuff because somewhere it will impact them later on in life, with healthy relationships. And what are the steps that kids need to take to protect themselves, but to understand the world when they come across somebody who is trans or somebody that's different from them, to be able to have the...
Right. They're going to get messaging.
Yes.
They're going to get a messaging, whether that person wants that child to get the messaging, whether they want them to even know that a trans person exists or doesn't exist. The messaging is out there. So in my world, I want to control my messaging. I want the kids to hear my story from me, not from some person on TV that is telling
or a
the
commentator
story
or any of that stuff.
So the kids play sports. That is so cool. Do you get to go to see some of
I
it?
do. I get to go to the hockey rinks.
For me, sports is this thing where my brain says, okay, body, go do this. And my body does it. And it's one of the few times in my life where I actually get a relationship that is good between my brain and my body.
Yeah, I think it's important. Like for me too, sports is what saved me. It gave me an opportunity in which to get away from the body dysphoria that you were feeling, that you couldn't explain, that, messages were you're bad, you're wrong, you're weird, as opposed to just focusing on, being a person. And so I was good at it back in my youth, and so that's what gave me a little bit of praise and a little bit more self-esteem. And then that's kind of like, helped with the impact of giving me some of the strength to do what it is I do today. The key is, what do we do with sports in showing good sports personship, I think, is the big thing. To honor your competitors that are going to push you, to honor the other team that's going to make you better, as opposed to, too many times you see fights out on the field or people talking trash, like as if putting people down is actually going to make you a little bit better. How do we work on good sports personship? You're high-fiving your teammate when they do something well. You want other people around you to succeed just as much as they want you to succeed.
Let's play another hole.
Absolutely.
Oh,
It's way down there. So,
yeah.
what do you figure? What's that, like a par 5, par 4,
It's
par
par
3?
3.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh my goodness.
All
right, again, you go first and model. And I'll try and pick up something from there. Woo! Woo! Oh! See, I saw that. It was gonna almost like keep going. I see how it curves at first, and then it can straighten out and go the other way.
Yeah, it
and
was
go
actually
from there.
not a bad shot at all. It just hit a tree.
That's
which is
awesome.
like my thing to do.
Curve. Up. Nope. I think I'll flick.
That is such a pretty disc to watch fly. Orange is good.
It feels good. Oh! Oh, nice shot. Oh, that's great.
If it's not there.
Oops.
Backward skip. You
Okay.
see that? So does Rhode Island have any other bills in the work right now? Like when I was checking, it looked like everything was really truly pretty solid for protections for the trans community.
Yeah, it's good now. Now it's a matter of bridging the gap or allowing, I think, trans people who have faced more systematic discrimination to come forward. Because still, even though we have it in the books, sometimes there's still that element of being able to speak up and speak out. You know, just speaking from my own experience or observing people who hear about somebody talking about them experiencing discrimination in the workplace, it's a very sometimes dismissive mindset. Like, oh, here's somebody who just wants a lot of money. Or, you know, you see those patterns.
Right.
If they don't understand the nature of the cases that are going on and how that discrimination kind of manifests itself amongst the working environment and relationships. It's there and in place, but I don't think it's been utilized enough because you still hear some stories. And then to understand your rights or to be able to identify this doesn't make sense. This person is, not mean, but like literally deliberately trying to get in your way of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So we keep getting back to education, 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 knowing your rights, knowing what discrimination looks like, being able to identify your own prejudices besides other people's, and then having the resources to then access, and then it takes a long time to process as well. So there are all these hidden barriers that continue that most folks are not aware of.
I think you're going to make this one. I do.
Oh, in and out of the cup.
That was a lot of positive thought.
In and out of the cup. You feel like it counts? Okay. It's the most exciting though too, right? Like when you like putt a golf or whatever, it's like harder to attempt.
So you see your role as filling a gap between a law that's been put in place. The schools have created a guidance and a policy, but now they don't know what to do.
Right. And so that's kind of like where I come in terms of, teaching the educators the small steps that they can take that are going to make a huge difference in the eyes of a trans or gender nonconforming person that, is getting to know themselves or discovering who they are in the process of the curriculum that they have to learn. So it's really stressing to teachers, like most teachers know anyway, if you don't have a good relationship with your student, there's no way you can get through to them to communicate effectively.
So you offer best practices in a way?
Best practices, solutions, really also meeting teachers and educators where they're at in terms of this subject matter, and then being able to connect why this subject matters in society, because we are human, but there are all those, prejudices and biases that we've all grown up with, all had these messages that even if it's a positive message to one person might be negative to somebody else. And so how can you craft a message that's inclusive for all and being aware of what's happening? So I'm excited for the future. Long way to go. Happy to be here as long as I can be.
You're doing an important job for the community.
Right.
You're laying the groundwork that the people continue to lay. There are people ahead of you and ahead of me that were doing this hard work.
Yeah, and to really pay homage to, our transcestors, Sylvia Rivera, Marsha P., understanding the difficulties that they went through, the tragedies that they had to go through, but also the brilliance of their resilience. And I think that that's also important in our school systems, to start to teach LGBTQ issues, why we have pride, why we do this work. It's really to create more empathetic, more in tune human beings with one another, to get to know each other on deeper levels, so that moving forward, when we do, bump up against the natural tragedies that we experience, we're closer, we can help each other through those moments. We have access to the internet, and kids are way more far along, I feel like, than what we were way back when. If I had this stuff, just like you'd said, I think things could have been on a totally different level, to know that there was somebody you could go to talk about these experiences with, instead of hold this deep down secret for, a good chunk of time that, certainly has a wear and tear on mental health. We have to continue to just be there and send the right messages, which is we're here to love and support. And how do you do that? By taking actions that demonstrate that.
So when you transitioned, were you out right off the bat, or do you mind sharing a little bit of your coming out story?
Yeah, when I first came out, I mean, it was a process. I had always known since I was about 5 years old, or I was aware of myself, that I was a boy. But then, society and family told me not the messages that I didn't want to hear, and that certainly took a toll. I first, discovered the words. I didn't have the words in high school to describe the experiences, so it was later on in college that, I finally discovered that about myself. And then it was the challenge of knowing that in order for me to live in existence, that I had to go through the next steps of being, the authentic self. What do I need to do for healthcare? What do I need to do for mental health? What can I do in order to survive? Yeah, I think it was probably my junior or senior year in college. I started bit by bit, but I also knew that it was important for me with my family to come along. And so I waited on a couple of things in order to get through some of those issues. And I think that that's how, my family felt as well, was that they weren't going to give up on me, but they certainly, they didn't really, ask some of the questions of how can we be the most supportive. It was don't do this, for fear of the consequences of what would happen later on. Someone once said to me, and I used this actually for my wedding vows, someone had posed to me, well, who's going to love you? And that who is going to love you question was really along the lines of, I love you, but don't do this because I don't know, what's in store for you. And then to be able to say in front of, some really close folks in my life that somebody has found me. They love me wholly and completely, with all my quirks, with all, the weird things that I do. They see I would like to think that they see the passion that I have for what I do as something that contributes to the world. And for that, I'm ever grateful. And I'm grateful to folks like you and Patrick to be able to be telling these stories in this time and space.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. If we weren't doing it, we wouldn't be getting pushback.
Right.
That's how I look
right.
at it.
So we must be doing something right.
Be
using religious freedom as an excuse of a belief is, we know what you're doing, really. Yeah. Like, let's be honest. Your actions and your behaviors don't match up. They're inconsistent, and you're not living your truth. So what kind of anger are you manifesting towards us?
Right. We know the hate that they're doing. You can see it. Good is a little bit different.
Yeah.
Good works underneath the current. It changes people slowly. It carves out paths towards love. And that's what we're doing with it. And I thank you so much for coming on this
You're very welcome. This
has
been an amazing experience. I'm so glad we got to reconnect.
All right. Thank you so much. Rhode Island is lucky to have Stephen, and I'm lucky to call him a friend. For more information about youth support services in Rhode Island, visit the links in the description.
Oh, I love it.
All over here. Oh, and a smiley face for Rhode Island. There we go. I want to thank everyone who made a donation. Your generosity is what makes the transnational journey possible. To help grow the show, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.